Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Bakels. I'm Program Director of Developer Health at G2i. G2i is a platform that connects healthy developers to great companies. My work focuses on initiatives to support the mental and physical health of software developers. And today I'm joining as the host of our community chat. We have a great guest with us. We have Matan Kubovsky joining us to talk about how to retain engineers. It's a great topic. Matan is CTO of Matan Consulting, which is executive coaching and advising that he does. And how to retain engineers is an amazing topic because it's one that never goes out of date. It's one that we can always be learning from. Hiring in general is very expensive. So when you make a bad hire, that's very costly to a company. When you make a good hire, you want to really be able to keep that engineer with your team. The average tenure of engineers at a lot of companies is roughly 3 years, which is pretty short compared.
Michelle?
Yeah, I think we lost Michelle for a bit.
Right. I'm back. Can you guys hear me? Let me know in the chat if you guys can.
Yes, we can
Okay,
hear.
perfect. All right, sorry about that. It looks like my authentication token expired. I don't know, I just got logged out in the middle of hosting this session, so that was very bizarre. But anyway, Matan will take it from here. And oh yeah, I think we lost him too. I don't see his screen anymore. Very strange issue. Hmm. Hold on one second. Matan, if you're able to still hear us, just try and refresh your page. That's what worked for me. It'll bring you back through. But yeah, while we're working on that, just continuing the thought that I was on, really important to try and keep engineers on your team once you've already hired them, so that you don't have to turn over a really difficult role to fill constantly. And it just makes for a better workplace for all of your employees. So Matan's going to be sharing some insights from an article that he wrote that we found on LeadDev, actually, called "3 Tips for Retaining Key Engineering Talent." It's a great article, and he has like a framework that he uses for working with his engineers and a lot of experience, good and bad, that he will share with us and the learnings from all of that. So it'll just be one more minute, I think, get him back, and we'll continue. Well, while we're waiting for Matan to join, I'm not sure how long it's going to be, but if everybody wants to leave in the chat where they're joining us from, this is always a cool thing to see because we actually have people from around the world that are part of our G2i community. So it's really cool to see where everybody's joining from. Personally, myself, I am joining from South Florida. I know that Thea is joining from Denmark, and Matan, I believe, is based in Israel. So just the three of us are pretty spread out across the world as it is. But if you want to leave in the chat where you're joining, Richard's joining from Nigeria. That's awesome. So we already have like a couple of continents represented. All
Hi
right.
everyone. Okay. Finally, the links worked after we got kicked out. Should we start?
Yeah, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay, let me join the stage and share the screen. Okay, now I guess you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Now
And we can see you.
I have the role to share screen. 1 second. Sorry for that, everyone. Let's just start. Okay, so as Michelle said, my name is Matan. I'm running my own consultancy firm. Today, what we're going to talk about is how to retain your key employees. And I would like to start with a short story about my biggest mistake as a VP of engineering. It all started 7 years ago when I just got my first role as a VP of engineering in the startup that I founded 7 years ago. My team was 20 and 25 developers, and we just needed to create a new module that tests the entire product. It is basically a new automation model that allows to test each and every feature of the product. Since I didn't have any new headcount in my sleeve, I had what I thought would be a great idea, and that was to offer the position of a QA automation testing lead to one of my developers. He was the third employee of the company, one of the strongest developers that I had the chance to work with. And as I said, I thought it was a great idea to offer him the title of a team lead in the QA under the QA manager, and to build the platform and the framework to be able to test our entire product, and also to create coverage of up to 80% testing to our entire solution. So he started working on that, and he got the offer, accepted the offer, and he became a QA team lead. I lost him as a developer for that period, but I received a team lead that was really motivated, at least in the beginning. After 3.5 months, he came to my office in one of these mornings, and I was quickly able to see that he was a bit sad and a bit frustrated, and he immediately told me that he no longer wanted to be a QA team lead, mainly because of this title, that he believes that the entire framework and testing is nearly done, and that he wishes to go back and be an individual contributor. I told him, I need to think about it, because you said that you'll complete the entire project in 1 year, and now we're only 30% into the coverage and into the framework, and let me think about it. The next day, I asked him to have a short meeting, and I told him that I really need him to complete the effort that he committed to. So for me, it was a bit of insisting on him to complete his commitment, to complete the project. But what this really resulted is in him leaving the company. Again, as I said, we were a relatively small team by then, only 20, 25 developers. But since he was the third developer of the company, with his leaving the company, we lost much more than just a single individual or a team lead. He had massive experience with our stack that we used as a startup. He was really familiar with our architecture and the product and across all the aspects of testing, architecture, scale, interconnectivity between the modules, and he was even in the great culture of our small startup. So at the end of the day, him leaving caused a chain reaction of other folks leaving, and it was a really big hit for our engineering team. For me, it was a very important lesson as a VP of engineering of when to insist and when not to insist on someone's will and desire, and especially if someone is such a key engineer that is part of the team. Since then, I started to use a different approach in order to retain my talent, in order to retain the key developers that I used to have while I headed engineering and as an engineering manager. I created and executed a growth and retention program for each of my developers. Sometimes in periods where I really had to focus only on the key developers, I did that for the key developers, let's say up to 20% of the entire team. But this program allowed me to get into a much higher retention ratios or percentages and to really reduce attrition to nearly zero. What I would like to share with you now is 3 tips on how to build and execute such a growth and retention program for each of your developers. So the first tip would be to show care and make periodic touch points with your team. The first item on that is to have and really insist on having weekly one-on-ones with each of your developers, with each and every one of your engineers. These one-on-ones are super important, not only to speak about a certain feature or the day-to-day activities, a bug, a feature, a task, but also to really talk about satisfaction, to really see the employee in a closed room with privacy and to be able to touch base and to check the status of your developers. This means a lot to engineers, and I oftentimes hear that the fact that developers or engineers didn't have periodic weekly one-on-ones with their managers really caused them or led them to believe that their managers didn't care for them. In these one-on-one sessions, you have to provide context. So constantly provide context to the people, your directs. By context, I talk about business context. It could be a certain feature that is required by a certain client, but it can also be a technological context. We're doing this big change, this massive change, because we are in need to improve this KPI by 10%, because we want to scale up the system or to improve the uptime of the system by this and that KPI. Sharing feedback is also a great aspect of these one-on-ones. Researchers say that the ratio of 6:1 is the optimal ratio of giving positive feedback as opposed to constructive feedback. So I'm not saying here that you must give praise and super positive feedback to the ones that are not meeting your expectations. Obviously, this is a different topic, but for your key developers, for the ones you really want to retain, the 6-to-1 ratio is the optimal one. Also, around feedback, what I found super valuable and super impactful is not to wait for the weekly one-on-one to give feedback, but to provide real-time feedback. That means that if something really good or something really bad happened, you should give real-time feedback to the individual or to the one you would like to feedback. That could be a phone call or a video call at the same day that the issue happened. Tip number 2, be proactive and present a plan. You should come up with a plan as a proactive manager to the key developers, the key engineers, the key individuals that you would like to retain. This is essentially, and that's from my experience, a one-pager that includes a timeline and a path for that individual to be promoted or to be progressed to their next level. So it could be, hi, Tom Smith. This is the one-pager that I created for you in order for you to become a senior developer. The timeline for that is 12 to 18 months. I obviously cannot guarantee and promise anything because I don't know what would happen in the organization within this timeline, but rest assured that I will do anything possible to get you there and to talk to my manager and help you become or get this title. This one-pager should talk about the growth needed for the individual to become or to get the next title. It could be, by the way, a team lead position. It could be a product manager, a move from an engineering position to a product manager position. This one-pager should also include the impact that the individual should make and the expectations from him that would allow him to progress and grow to the next level. So things like you would get bigger projects in terms of scope. We will work together on your personal brand in order for you to grow. So you would speak in conferences, you would speak in front of bigger audiences within the company and possibly outside of the company. You would engage with clients, with product managers, and everything needed for that individual to show how proactive you were as a manager, as his or her manager, to provide them with such a plan. So you might be surprised, but this makes a huge impact for the developer and creates high engagement levels and high motivation for them to continue investing a lot of effort and see that timeline and horizon. The third tip would be to delegate and avoid micromanagement. If you want your key individuals, your key engineers to be satisfied and to keep pushing themselves and the individuals around them, you should avoid using micromanagement. You should let those people lead, meaning that you should connect them with product managers to pour additional context to them. So they will not only speak to their direct managers, but also to other interfaces within the organization. You should also use tools, asynchronous tools, such as dashboards that are going to be prepared for anyone who wants to know status, and daily meetings for getting to update on progress and status checks. This basically allows those key individuals to see that you trust them. And while provided that there is a good expectation set or alignment between you and those developers that you would like to retain, and how they should update those asynchronous tools, then they would see how micromanagement dissolves and how projects are being progressed without managers looking at their sleeves or desks. So these were the main 3 tips that I have. Obviously, there are much more to say about them and additional tips, but also doing a deep dive into each one of the tips. I can say that apart from these tips, the most important bit is be human and touch your developers and engineers that you really want to maintain. Let them feel that you care about them and be proactive to show them that. And you could even stay for many years together and not be afraid from their attrition. So that was it in terms of slides. We can now move to your questions. I'll be happy to answer everything.
Thanks so much, Matan. That was a great presentation. Loved a lot, love your tips that you have here. As a developer myself, having been both a full-time employee and a contractor, I think that these can apply to both sides. I'll start with a question first, and then we'll go to the ones in the feed. We'll also extend a little bit longer since we had some technical issues, so we won't cut off at exactly 11:30. We might give it like an extra 5 or 10 minutes. But in this last tip here, you say use async tools like dashboards and dailies for progress and status check. I remember one time being a developer at a really big company. My engineering manager had way too many direct reports. And in order to kind of keep up with everybody, this started to become a tool that was used as like, okay, like how do we track that developers are doing their work, that they're staying on target, et cetera, right? And the first thing that they started tracking from the developers to see if they're actually working is number of commits per day, which was, in everyone's opinion, like a ridiculous metric to track to see if your developers are doing work, because the way that developers commit their code is so personal, it's opinionated. Some people like to commit often. Some people like to commit as like bigger chunks or ideas. Sometimes you might not make a commit, more than once a day. So that's like, it was this really stressful metric, like, oh, we're going to have this like daily check-in kind of thing. That's exciting. But then what they chose to measure was so stressful. So what do you suggest as being the metrics that you use to track your developers and their work?
Wow, this is a great question. It opens up an unsolved problem topic, which is dev productivity and measuring engineering organizations. I have dozens of founders and CTOs and startup leaders that I'm working and have worked in the past 18 months on this exact topic. And by the way, there are countless startups that just created in the past 2 years to try to tackle this problem. I'm a big fan of metrics. However, I'm not a big fan of just a single metric. So a combination or a mixture of metrics that measure satisfaction, commits, dev cycle, not necessarily commit, uptime of the product, and responsiveness of the screens are the ones that I've found super valuable and super beneficial. There is no single or a bulletproof solution to that, because it really depends on the varies among the size of the engineering team, the maturity level of the company, because a really mature company can measure a lot of things and address them, but a small startup can possibly manage or measure 1 or 2 things at most. So I cannot really say that there is a single framework that everyone can adopt and do. I know that there are the DORA metrics right now, and there's also the SPACE framework if you want to look it up. It's a framework that is based, that's an acronym. It was originated by Microsoft and additional research teams, and now it's becoming more and more adopted. But for me, there is no one single solution other than trying to create a tailor-made metric level or framework for each organization. I would just say one thing. I'm always trying to find the metrics or to define each and every metric from a positive perspective. So I'm not measuring downtime, I'm measuring uptime. It's always great to see that you have 97% uptime and not 3% downtime. I want to optimize 97% and push that towards 99%. So retention rates or satisfaction rates as opposed to attrition, and so on. Each and every metric can have each way or both sides of the perspective.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks for that insight. And I agree. I think it's a very, very difficult thing to try and measure. And I think that, finding the numbers that put a picture together more holistically instead of pinning everything on one number is definitely very good advice. I'm going to go to the questions from the audience. The first one from Frank is, do you have any tips on how to retain engineers in Europe when we are competing with US salaries that are much more attractive?
Well, yeah, again, a very good question. In every research that you would see, and also from my experience that is more than 15 years working with both developers in the US, in Israel, and in Europe, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, obviously the salary is something that is attractive, but it's definitely not among the first three elements that keep someone at work. Those are typically among: who is your manager? What drive do you get from the product or from your day-to-day activity? And third is how much you learn or how much you consider that you're learning, because this could be even more fruitful than just the salary. So my tip for that would be: invest in your developers, invest in their retention programs, build them proactively a retention and growth programs, and show them how much you care, not only by telling them that you care, but really provide them a plan to show them how the product would benefit them, how much they are going to learn and progress and get a new title as part of working with your organization, and who are the people among them or alongside them through this road. If they are experts and they are professionals on their own, these elements would keep someone at work as opposed to moving to a US company.
Great response. Yeah, I agree. I think we're really starting to see a really big shift in the value of a salary when developers are evaluating joining a company. I don't want to misquote the data here, so I'll leave out the percentages, but I'll just say in general, millennials who are now around like 30s, 40s, and Gen Z that are early workforce are starting to show that they care more about workplace culture, the ethics of a company, and like the kind of things like having autonomy, feeling respected. So many things outside of salary, they're actually rating salary and benefits lower into the things that they care about, or the things that they find to be the most important when evaluating a company.
Right.
So I think that your tips also help support all of that.
Exactly. This is what I was going to say. So what you mentioned is values of companies, like good culture, being empathetic, being proactive, provide autonomy, are the super headlines that derive those tips that I really am looking forward to continue fostering with the managers that I'm working with.
Yes. So the next question that we have is, can you share some best practices for conducting one-on-one meetings effectively and maintaining high developer motivation?
Yeah, sure. Again, keep those one-on-ones running. Okay, let's try to do a super practical here. Don't skip one-on-ones. In the beginning of the one-on-ones, let's say it's a new employee or resetting the one-on-one routine, tell your directs that you expect from them to raise topics, to bring topics to the one-on-one sessions. So as an example, I always had a one-on-one document shared among myself and my directs, and even throughout the week or a period when we didn't have one-on-one, they were able to open it up and shoot topics there that I could read beforehand, even though sometimes I didn't, but sometimes I was surprised, and that was fine. But I asked them to provide topics on their own. The third tip would be use your feet. If you're able not to do every time an online or an office meeting, use your feet to do a one-on-one while walking. So by having two people walking to the same direction instead of sitting in front of one another, it can make a big impact. So if you
Matan, it looks like you froze again. All right, we're going to try and get Matan back. We're having some technical problems today. It's okay, it happens.
know,
I can hear you.
great, let's continue. Sorry for that. I don't know what happened.
You were talking about walking alongside someone.
Yeah, I was just saying that if you're able to do a one-on-one while walking, it has an amazing impact. Two people going towards the same direction makes a big change to energy. So that would be the third tip. Also, as I said, in terms of feedback, that would be the last tip for now on that. Severe feedback, it could be even good or bad. Don't wait for the one-on-one to provide it. Do that in real time. Make sure to do it on the very same day, and don't wait 6-7 days for that to take place.
Yeah, I think that those are really great tips. I always appreciate, like when I get real-time feedback for sure. I don't want to be doing something for a week that's not good or, not aligned with like my goals or objectives or what we're trying to build and work on. So I definitely think like having that constant feedback loop is really great. And the one-on-ones too. Like we do one-on-ones at G2i regularly and it's so helpful. And sometimes you'll kind of be like, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And then you get into the meeting and it's like, wait a minute, we actually have a lot to discuss, and it's kind of surprising. And then having that document of things to like add to as you think of it, because especially when you're kind of like in deep work throughout the day, you go into your one-on-one and you're like, honestly, I can't even remember anything from before the last 4 hours. Like all I can think about is this thing. So you forget and you miss that opportunity to bring things up. So yeah, I think that all of those are really good tips. Got another question from Thea. Can you provide some practical examples of how to balance providing support and guidance to developers while also avoiding micromanagement?
Yeah, sure. So micromanagement is always the easiest solution. So for example, you can just talk to the developer, ask them how a certain feature goes or doesn't go. But I think that for managers, setting expectations is the most important aspect. I'll give an example. Let's say that there is a feature that needs to be completed in 2 weeks. I would go to my direct, it could be a team lead or it could be a developer, and tell them, listen, you said that the feature is going to be completed in 2 weeks. If there is any delay, my expectation is that you will not come just on the last day and tell me, listen, this is going to be delayed in 2 weeks. I believe in you. I am intending to give you full ownership and independence on that feature. But my expectation is that by the end of 2 weeks, it's either that the feature was completed or that you gave or we raised the flag a few days before, but not on the last minute. So it's basically a balance between setting expectations and avoiding or not avoiding doing micromanagement. On the other hand, and with that I would finish this example, if there is an individual who is not delivering, and again, I'm not raising my voice, I'm just saying, listen, this doesn't work. This previous feature didn't work, it didn't meet the expectation. And I gave you full ownership and full independence, and I didn't test and I didn't micromanage this process or this project because I really believed in you. It's not now that I don't believe in you, but in this project that is going to be reduced in scope for the next 10 days, I will have checkpoints 3 times along the way. And let's say we have 1 or 2 cycles like that, I will revert back to giving you full autonomy. So again, it's not an equation that there is one answer to that. It really depends on the individual and how much leash we can provide or take on ourselves.
I think that that's really great, especially the expectation setting and the communication are so important. There's a quote that I really like, and it's people don't hate bad news, they hate surprises. So if you understand that there's something that's not ideal coming up, like you're missing a deadline or this feature is not going to be deliverable, the requirements, it's just, you thought it was going to work out and it's just not, just communicate it, because it's like bad things happen. Things don't always happen perfectly, but it's the surprises that are actually the thing that causes the pain points.
Right. Totally.
So there's one last question and then we'll wrap it up. So a lot of what you shared discusses effective strategies for retaining and nurturing in-house developers. How do you adapt these strategies when working with freelance or contract professionals to ensure their satisfaction and commitment to your projects?
Again, a very good question. I think that for freelance or contractors, sometimes it's much easier. In some cases, having freelance or contractor individuals is much easier, but sometimes it's much harder. I'll give both sides. So if you have a freelancer or contractor and they don't deliver, you can easily cut them out of the staff, because that's the whole idea. However, on the other hand, creating engagement and motivation among these people that oftentimes don't feel as part of the team or the natural team is much harder. I typically do as follows. At least between myself and the contractor, or between my team lead, my direct, who is a team lead, and the contractor, I again set expectation, really clear set expectation that we're starting with a pilot period of 1 to 3 months. In that time, I do anything possible to make them feel part of the team. If there is a meeting and they're not on, I pause everything and I ask them to invite this contractor who should be part of the team. I invite them to fun activities outside of the office. I put my budget on them as if they were real-time, full-time employees. However, in my setting expectations, I also expect them to put a lot of effort and to justify how I treat them. So to have it a mutual process between me and them, as if they were full-time employees. So what I would like to summarize is that I would really like to benefit from both worlds. If they do not deliver, I cut the rope quickly because I'm not legally bound to them as a full-time employees. But if they are making the effort, I will do anything possible to provide them with enough motivation and desire to continue doing so.
I think that's the perfect answer. I mean, I'm biased because like this is exactly what I would want to hear as a developer, and I believe that this is true as well. There are all kinds of reasons why you would contract someone. I mean, it's not just because the work is time boxed to a short amount of time. You could be contracting someone because the company policy states that, you know, they only do contract to hire. So, you know, this could be your dream developer for your team, but you're required to contract them temporarily. Or it can be, you know, your dream developer, but they live in a different country. So visa requirements mean that you can't necessarily hire them outright. There's all kinds of reasons to have a contractor. So I think the biggest thing to motivate your contractors to work the same way as your full-time developers or your in-house is to treat them as if they're all the same. This is something that I saw kind of go awry at a company that used a lot of contractors, especially in the in-person days. They would have this big conference room and it's like, okay, we're going to have this like ice cream social for the full-time employees, but we're all sitting next to each other. And it's like, well, how are you going to leave people on the floor while everyone else to work while everyone else is eating ice cream in front of you? Like, so obviously this didn't go very well. And they started to get it like, oh, you know, just because that they're here under different like requirements or legalities or structures, everybody is working on the same projects. Their contributions are equally important. We really need them to, you know, be just as motivated or feel appreciated. And so all of those kind of separated like parties, activities, stuff like that that all went away. And everybody started getting treated the same, and it did wonders for the contractor employee relationship manager relationship. So I couldn't agree more with what you said.
It just cannot work these days with Gen Z and with millennials. It just cannot work anymore.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's a new day. But Matan, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wrap up. Thank you for sticking with us through some of these issues that we had technically. And thanks everyone for being patient and hanging out with us and sticking around. I wanted to ask, how can people get in touch with you after this?
So feel free to get into my LinkedIn. That's my name. I'm available over there. I have my email, my personal website, and people can just connect me through my phone, through WhatsApp or email. And I'd be happy to continue the conversations.
Amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. Great conversation, great insights. And we will stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.